The sea lay calm beneath the early light, its surface smooth as polished stone, betraying nothing of the dangers hidden beneath. In Scheherzade's tale, the fisherman stood alone on the shore, the sealed jar heavy in his hands. Within it, the jinn raged, his voice echoing against the metal walls, swearing vengeance, swearing death, swearing that no mercy would be returned for mercy once given. King Shahryar listened, as though the waves themselves whispered into his ears. The fisherman, Scheherazade said, did not rejoice in his victory. Though he had outwitted a being of terrible power, fear still clung to him like wet cloth. He knew that strength alone could not protect him, and that cleverness, once used, must be used again with care. He sat upon a rock, the jar before him, and considered the weight of choice. The jinn's voice softened, then sharpened, shifting like the wind. He pleaded first, then threatened, then pleaded again. He spoke of centuries trapped in darkness, of promises made and broken, of how rage had consumed him until destruction felt like justice. If freed again, he vowed to reward the fisherman beyond imagination. Treasures buried beneath seas, kingdoms hidden from men, power enough to reshape fate itself. The fisherman hesitated. Scheherazade lingered on that moment, stretching it like a breath held too long. Shahryar felt it in his chest, the familiar pull between vengeance and restraint. How many times had he stood at such a crossroads, blade in hand, choosing certainty over risk? How many times had fear of betrayal driven him to strike first, to leave no space for regret? In the story, the fisherman spoke at last. He reminded the jinn of his oath, of the death he had promised moments earlier. He asked how trust could be rebuilt when terror had been the first gift offered. The jinn answered with silence, then with a confession. Rage had blinded him. Imprisonment had hollowed his soul. He no longer remembered who he had been before the centuries of darkness. Moved, yet cautious, the fisherman made his choice. He broke the seal. Smoke poured forth once more, coiling into the towering shape of the jinn. But this time there was no thunderous laughter, no raised hand of destruction. The jinn knelt. His voice, when he spoke, was heavy with something unfamiliar shame. Scheherazade described the reward not as gold or jewels, but as guidance. The jinn led the fisherman to a hidden pool whose waters cured illness, whose fish brought fortune not through greed, but through balance. The fisherman returned home, not rich in excess, but secure in survival. When the story paused, Shahryar found himself silent. The lesson pressed against him, uncomfortable and persistent. Mercy had been offered where destruction was easier. Trust had been extended where fear demanded control. The king felt the old wound of betrayal ache anew, but alongside it came a quieter realization. His cruelty had never protected him from pain. It had only spread it outward, endlessly. That night, passed without execution, in the palace servants began to move differently. Whispers softened. Steps grew lighter. The sword, once polished nightly, remained untouched, yet no proclamation was made. No law was overturned. Life continued, suspended between hope and terror. On the following night, Scheherazade continued, weaving another tale into the fisherman's of a merchant burdened by fate, pursued by forces beyond his understanding. Again, words replaced steel. Again, wit outweighed power. Each story reflected a different face of justice, each ending balanced carefully between mercy and consequence. Shahryar felt his certainty eroding. He began to notice details he had long ignored. The tired eyes of his guards, the way his vizier's shoulders no longer sagged with despair, the subtle return of music to the gardens at dusk. His kingdom, once frozen by fear, was slowly remembering how to breathe. Yet doubt haunted him. One night, long after Scheherazade had withdrawn, the king walked the palace corridors alone. He paused outside the chamber where the sword rested. His oath echoed in the silence, demanding to be fulfilled. Was he weak, he wondered, to delay? Was mercy merely another form of surrender? He thought of the giant's valley, of the woman who had betrayed even her monstrous captor. That memory still burned, sharp and bitter, but now it was joined by others. The fisherman's careful words, the jinn's bowed head, the possibility that not all choices ended in treachery. When Scheherazade returned the next evening, Shahryar surprised himself by asking a question. "Why do your stories always stop before certainty?" he said. She met his gaze calmly. "Because certainty ends listening," she replied, "and listening is where change begins." The king said nothing more, but the words lingered. Night after night, the stories continued. Some ended in justice swift and severe, others in forgiveness, earned through suffering. Scheherazade did not deny the existence of evil. She simply refused to pretend it was the only truth. The people of the city began to mark time differently, not by executions, but by stories. Mothers whispered them to children at bedtime. Merchants repeated them in the marketplace. Shahryar's voice, though confined to the palace, echoed beyond its walls, and Shahryar, once deaf to anything but his own rage, listened. As another dawn approached, Scheherazade concluded the fisherman, Ep5. At last, she spoke of how the man lived long and quietly, never again testing fate beyond necessity. He remembered the jar not as a symbol of terror, but as a reminder that wisdom often appeared where fear expected violence. The king closed his eyes. For the 5th time, dawn came without blood. The oath of death remained unbroken in words, yet weakened in spirit. And in its place, something fragile and dangerous began to grow, a belief that stories could reshape fate, one night at a time.